The first thing that you want to remember when you're mounting your work is to make sure that you are using black board, not white board, and you want to use either black foam board or black mat board or illustration board, which is more like cardboard. The black foam board, the best thing to cut it with is your X-Acto knife. Make sure that your blade is sharp and make sure you're very careful because they're very dangerous instruments. If you're cutting mat board, the best tool to use is utility knife because you can press down harder and get a cleaner cut. When you're cutting your board, make sure you use a metal ruler because if you're using a plastic ruler or a wood ruler, whether you realize it or not, you're actually taking little shavings off of it every time you cut, and eventually your ruler will not be straight anymore. So make sure you're using a metal ruler, and you also want to use a cutting mat, which you got in your kit, or the cutting mat that is in the production lab. You do not want to cut anything on the desks, and you do not want to cut mat board or foam board on the paper cutter. It is a paper cutter, so cut paper on it. If you keep cutting mat board and foam board on the paper cutter, it will dull the blades and throw it out of alignment, and then when you need to cut some paper, it won't cut it. Okay, when you are cutting your board or your mat, what you want to do, pretend I'm cutting this, but you want to try to hold your knife as straight as possible. You don't want to turn it at an angle. You want to hold the blade straight up and down, and you're going to make as many passes as you need to cut completely through the board, because if you make one pass and it doesn't cut all the way through, and then you kind of freehand it or you just try to break it, it's going to make the edge look really, really bad. So you want to make as many passes as you need to make a clean cut. You also want to make sure that you use a sharp blade, because if you use a sharp blade, you'll get a cleaner cut and there's less chance that you will cut yourself. Most of the time, you're more likely to cut yourself shaving with a dull blade than a fresh blade. Same thing with the X-Acto knife. A sharp blade is actually safer. And then the next thing you need to do is measure your board. Well, cut your board to size, cut your picture to size, and then mark off on the board exactly where you're going to mount the artwork once you're ready to put it down. You don't want to eyeball it and guess where you're going to put it. Chances are it's not going to be straight. So one of the tricks to using rubber cement is that you can actually use it as contact cement, and a lot of people don't know this. So what you want to do is have this lovely picture of my sister's dog, and what you're going to do is cover the back with rubber cement completely. And you want to try to go in one direction as much as possible, and don't keep going back over and over and over the same spot, because once it starts to dry, you'll start to make little crumbs which will show up on the front of the artwork as little bumps. Okay, I missed a little spot here. There you go. Okay, so we are going to let that dry completely. And we're going to do the same with the mat board. I'm going to cover the entire area where the picture will go. Not just the corners, not just the sides, the whole And it doesn't matter if you get some over the edge. Just cover the whole area and try to get a nice thin, even coat. Now, one thing that helps you get a thin, even coat, you guys probably all got a small jar of rubber cement in your kit that has a little brush attached to it. What I do is I buy what's called a rubber cement jar. It's nice because it's big, and it also has an adjustable brush so that when the jar is really full, I can raise the brush up, and when the jar is almost empty, I can lower the brush down. It makes it more economical because you can buy a larger container of rubber cement, and it's just more economical than continuing to buy the little jar that has the brush in it. I also buy a container of Bestine, which is solvent for the rubber cement, and what I like to do is you get one of each of these, and then you fill up your jar half with cement and half with thinner. And if you guys have the can that came in your kit, then you can use up about half of it and then do the same thing. So what you do is you fill it half with thinner, half with cement, mix it up really well because the thinner will float on the top, so if you don't mix it up really well, you're basically just putting thinner on your piece and it won't stick very well. So mix it half and half like that, and then it's going to be really, really thin and watery, which is good for a couple of reasons. One is that it will dry faster, and the other reason is it's less likely to make lumps and bumps under your artwork that will show up from the surface. Bestine is sort of the wonder liquid. You can use it to get assorted types of glue off of things. You can use it to help you get fingerprints off of things and grease spots if you drop a French fry on your artwork or something. You can use it to clean your rulers and triangles. It's also extremely toxic. So usually when I use Bestine, I try to wear some rubber gloves. Just be really careful with it. Use it in a well-ventilated area. If you get it on yourself, rinse your hands off. Just try to be safe with the stuff, but it really is great for numerous purposes. Okay, so as you can see, this is pretty much dry, almost dry. This is dry also, so it doesn't stick to anything. This doesn't stick to anything either. Okay, it's dry, this is dry, but when you stick them together, they form a really strong bond. So, okay. So what I do is I have the two pieces. You have to be careful now because if they touch anything else, they won't stick to it, but if they touch each other, they'll stick. So, what you do is you cover up your entire thing except for one little corner that you marked off. And then I put down one little corner and line it up with my marks here. Now, I'm not going to cover this just so you can see it, but one thing you might want to do is also cover your artwork with another piece of paper while you're rubbing it down, which is also called burnishing, to protect your artwork. I'm not going to, so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so what you want to do is place a corner of your artwork in the corner that you marked on your board. and make sure that it's lining up with the marks that you made. And then what you want to do is gradually burnish the artwork down, slide the paper underneath out a little bit at a time, slide it out a little bit more, rub it down, slide it out, rub it down, and this way you can prevent air bubbles from getting under the piece as you go along, which is also really nice if you're working with a large piece of artwork, because I find that that's very tricky. So you get it all smoothed down, and you think, gee, that looks like a mess. So what you need is your rubber cement pickup, which came in your kit. I cut mine into 4 little pieces. Yours is larger. It's not an eraser that doesn't work, it's a rubber cement pickup. So all you do is go around the edges of your work, and it will pick up all that excess rubber cement that's laying around on the edges of your mat board. So now it's glued down all nice and tight and smooth, and I look at it and I think, you know what, I didn't mount that evenly. As you can see, this side is a little bit wider than that side. The nice thing about rubber cement is it lets you have another try. So what I can do, I have some Bestine in a little container that I bought at Target. I think it was 99 cents. If you want to get fancy, you can get a thinner dispenser, a little harder to come by, also about $20. So you may want to opt for the 99-cent version. And all you have to do is squirt a little bit of this on the corner of the artwork. And you're probably thinking, oh my God, you're getting it all wet, you're ruining it. No, this will completely dry and look absolutely normal when it's done. Let that soak in a little bit. I'm going to put on my rubber gloves now, just to be on the safe side. Okay. After you let that soak in a little bit, you'll be able to lift up a corner of the artwork and just keep squirting a little bit on as you go. And this will just lift right off. Okay. Now if we just wait a couple minutes and let this dry, it will be back to normal. And then I can use my rubber cement pickup and take the excess off of here, take the excess off of the piece of artwork, and start all over again. So we will let that sit for a moment. If you are using spray mount instead of rubber cement, then what you want to do is make sure that you are spraying the artwork and not the mat board. And what you'll want to do, we'll just pretend this is a piece of artwork, is just spray a nice even coat over the whole thing. And then I usually give an extra blast in the corners, and before it dries you want to place it on your board. And what I usually do is kind of the same with the rubber cement. I'll put a corner on there and slowly lay it down onto my board.
Hey, this is your fearless editor here, and apparently there's some audio problems here with this video, and I haven't had time to re-edit this, so I'm putting in this little patch here until I can get this fixed. Anyway, Heather is explaining that you need to get air bubbles out of the artwork in order for it to look right. That's it.
A couple things you can do to protect your artwork. I usually do this before I mount the piece, is spray it with fixative so that just gives you a little extra insurance. Make sure that you do not confuse your fixative and your spray mount. I had 2 people do this, and it really was hazardous to their artwork to cover their beautiful hand-drawn piece with glue. So make sure you're using fixative and not spray mount. If you're in a pinch, cheap hairspray works really well, like Aquanet, something like that. But in addition, I like to put a flap on my artwork, and this is just a piece of marker paper, which I like to use because it's a little sturdier than tracing paper. And just cut it to size to your board. And then what you want to do is to attach it on the back, not on the front. So. You can use black cover stock and black photographer's tape and make this look really slick if you want to. It's just a little extra protection for your artwork, and it also possibly protects other people's artwork from yours if you're using something like charcoal. The reason you want to tape it to the back is because, first of all, if you want to show it to someone, you can flip it over and there's no, tape on the front. But the other thing it does is if you take it off later and you're peeling this off and it accidentally rips the board, it's not ripping the front of your board. So you always want to tape the flap on the back. And then you have a nice little cover for your piece. I don't know what else to say.